Yeah. So first off, just want to thank everybody for subscribing. Appreciate you guys. Much love. Today I want to reminisce a little bit. Talk about the 90s. And I want to speak about the 90s from a street perspective. Because I do watch a lot of TV and whenever I get the chance. And catch a lot of documentaries. Things of that nature, right? And when I watch them and they talk about the 90s, they talk about it from this crazy perspective that I can't relate to. They say, oh yeah, in the 90s, for example, everybody was watching Friends. Everybody couldn't wait to see if this guy was gonna date this girl or whatever, right? And that's not, I don't remember, I never watched Friends. I don't know anyone who sat around and waited to watch Friends or who talked about Friends, who even related to Friends, right? So that was one thing there that I tripped out on. Another thing was the fashion styles that they choose to talk about. They talk about stuff that I don't remember a lot of, right? So I'm gonna talk about it from my perspective, from the perspective of the streets, not necessarily gangs. Yeah, we will discuss gangs, but just perspective of the streets, kids in the streets and shit. So first thing I want to talk about, and I'm gonna start from my perspective, like from when I was young. When I was real young, and this was real trippy to me, looking back. Back then it's not trippy. It wasn't trippy. It was normal. But now it's trippy looking back. Like, that's fucking crazy. Whenever you went into anywhere, really, any kind of establishment, there was like a smoking section. In the establishment. I remember inside of Burger King. Because I told the story before, whenever my mom got paid on the first of the month, we'd go to Burger King. We used to go to Burger King right there on Rosemead and Garvey. I used to walk over there. It was a 7-Eleven for a while. Now I think it's abandoned. But we would go over there, pick up Whoppers. They were 99 cents back then. Whenever I'd go over there, I would trip out because there was a smoking section. It was way in the back. There was a smoking section in the back of Burger King. Inside though, like inside, people could just light up and just like take a few fucking puffs of their cigarette or whatever. And it was everywhere, by playgrounds. So if your parents wanted to watch their kids play, they could basically light up a cigarette and start smoking near the playground. So it was just like everywhere. Smoking was a huge thing back then, where almost everyone was smoking. It was crazy. You know, I had girlfriends in high school that were smoking and shit. I tried to smoke. I was like, what the like, I don't know, like, I'd rather smoke bud, especially back in those days, because I don't know, I was like, what's smoking gonna do? I never, no disrespect to anyone that smokes, I know that's probably your thing. It's just something I couldn't fuck with. So yeah, smoking section was everywhere. That shit was a trip. When I got a little older, I got into tagging. I love tagging. Like, I don't do it anymore, of course. If I ever get the chance to hit up a piece on anything legally, I'm definitely gonna go for it. Like, definitely. I might not have the skills I once possessed, because of course I haven't practiced in years. I still get down on paper and stuff like that. But yeah, I definitely loved the tagging, like getting the cans. Back then they didn't really have a lot of, at least it was harder for us because I was young, really young when I was a tagger. So we didn't have a lot of the tips that they had. So we had to be unique, try to alter them in different ways and do things like that. So yeah, we couldn't just go purchase them, and nah, they weren't gonna do that for us. And a lot of it at first was toy, and it's crazy. You got older, like you are not older really. Yeah, you got older, but you had more experience with it. You'd be able to fuck it up, like. But the style of dress for me, while I was a tagger, was gangster. Back then, it was like Dickies, Ben Davis, Cortez, white shirts, or even black shirts, blue shirts, but t-shirts. So that's what that was what we wore, sported, basically looking like gangsters. The only difference is when I was a tagger, I had hair. I had my hair going back, and baggy clothes. So a lot of us dressed like that. A lot of us dressed like kind of gangster, like real baggy clothes, but not all the way gangs. Like you could tell the difference. Like at least I could. There were some taggers though that were straight full on tag bangers. I remember some homies, like I remember seeing Mami Little Potro, Drugsy, like they were dressing like straight gangsters as taggers. I did a little bit of that, but still like kept a tagger style, still baggy clothes, but I had my hair going back, and it was different, right? So, but that's what we used to do. A lot of us from the 90s started off as taggers, and I think it was an easy transition because when you're tagging, you're basically rebelling a bit. You know, you're damaging someone else's property, you crossing each other out, you're just like you're rumbling, you're doing shit like that. So you get used to that kind of stuff. You got your boys back. So somebody crosses you out, someone disrespects your peace, you're gonna try to find out who they are and go after them. And so that's basically a transition into gangbanging. So when you start gangbanging, now when I started gangbanging, that's when styles were a little different. So when I first started gangbanging, it was still Ben Davis, Frisco Benz, white shirts, black shirts, like t-shirts, but we always like to wear like, or at least I did, checkered shirts over it. And I liked my my pants creased, boom, because I used to wear them big. Like I was skinny as fuck, and I used to wear like 40s and 50s, boom. So I'd wear them all huge, right? Crease them down, like get the pleats in the middle, the letter belts. With letter belts, I used to even combine some of them, 3 letters, right? I put like EMF on the letters, bam, and then like tighten that shit up and then hit the streets. Remember I told you I wore checker shirts. What I would do is I would have the pants pleated, creased up, shirt tucked in, letter belt right there, and then I'd open the shirt, bam. So I'd walk down the street like that. We used to have hats, like make them right here like this, but like EMF and shit like that. Just walk down the street, like basically looking for trouble. So, and I know we talked about the payphones a lot. Payphones were a dangerous spot. You get caught slipping at a payphone, so you always had to be strapped, watching your back. So that's how it was for like gangsters, right? Oh yeah, I shaved my head, and after that, you know what? I changed my style a little bit so that was the mid 90s, going towards the late 90s, right before I went to YA. I changed my style a little bit. Still baggy pants, maybe not as baggy. Instead of the 50s and 60s, I had a pair of 60 Levi's 501s. Instead of that, what I would wear were like maybe 44s, 44 Levi's. Didn't wear Frisco's as much anymore. Was more focused on Levi's. So I'd wear like black 501s, blue 501s. Wouldn't really crease them anymore. Instead of the Nike Cortez, started wearing Filas. Still wore the checker shirts, and still wore the hats. Even sometimes would like throw a fedora on, bam. And homies used to clown though, because I was old school like that. I tried to wear a fedora and shit like that. And my homie Muppet still his headphones still clowns, because I went to court like that one time. Sometimes I'd wear like lugs, Stacey Adams, the SAOs. Like just different. I try to be a little different because I used to like to party and shit. So I didn't always want to dress like all banged out, because you know there was different kinds of girls who wouldn't necessarily only go for gangsters, right? So when you're on the party scene, I try to mix it up a little bit, dress a little gangster, but at the same time, what we called it casual. But that was definitely not casual. So we would hit parties. When you hit parties in the 90s, there were rebels. They used to throw badass parties, and rebels were a trip. Like they would pluck their eyebrows, they would wear like tight ass pants, tight ass shirts, Harley boots, had chains, different kind of hairstyles. Some of them had like the pompadour kind of hairstyles and shit. Other ones I seen like bald, even all kinds of earrings. Like just it was weird. Like it was different. And girls used to go crazy over there. Like, girls used to love the Rebels. They'd play techno and all that shit. House music, deep house. And their parties would be fucking off the chain. Like, for real. Like, their parties would be banging. And it'd be a good time. But it was crazy because some of the Rebels were on their way to becoming gangsters too. Because they would basically do the same shit. They'd get down with people at parties. And, you know, I remember the biggest crew in Monte that I remember was LSD Rebels. Used to be a tagging crew. Lansdale boys. The street off on Lansdale, Monte. Lansdale boys. And my neighbor was from LSD. Like, a lot of fools down the street were from LSD. And they were cool as fuck. Cool. We used to go robbing with them. I'm telling you, like they used to dress a certain way, but they were like G's. A lot of them were straight G's, and they'd fight with gangsters a lot of the times. They'd say, "Hey fool, you should have went with us with that party. We got into it with homies from such and such. Oh, we got into it with these cats from over here and over there." And they started doing their thing, and I tripped out on that. Like, damn, these fools are crazy, right? Because they're not gangsters, they're rebels. But like I said, they're from the streets, so they conducted themselves a certain way. And the same thing with taggers. When I was a tagger, the taggers were the same way. Sometimes they'd cross out neighborhoods to get into it with them because they were from the streets, so they conducted themselves a certain way. The 90s was a trip where everybody had a chip on their shoulder. It seemed like everybody had a chip on their shoulder. So yeah, I'm telling you, the parties were off the chain, man. So that was the Rebels. A lot of people ask me about like cancel culture and shit like that, right? The 90s, that was a time for like where people really try to cancel groups like Ice-T, because he had Cop Killer. You had 2 Live Crew and NWA. 2 Live Crew actually fought a case where they try to ban them. They try to ban them in stores. Like, that's real like cancel culture, right? They try to ban them, and they arrested people for selling their shit. Like, that's how illegal they wanted to make it. And they ended up winning a decision in the Supreme Court where they had the right to free speech, which they do. I agree with 100%. So that shit was a trip. So it's not all good. But these are just the times I remember. The murder rate was definitely sky high in the 90s. It started slowing down towards the end. But yeah, it was definitely high murder rate. But everything just, like, it seems like in the 90s, everything tried to be edgy. I remember wrestling, the Attitude Era. They tried to be edgy. They would do some crazy stuff that they wouldn't get away with today. Some crazy stuff. They had some crazy ass angles. A lot of nudity, semi-nudity I should say, on TV. A lot of like risque plot lines. Just, it was a trip. You had shows like Married with Children, The Simpsons. It's just like everything, not everything, but a lot of things try to push the envelope. Try to become edgier and edgier. The music, gangster rap was on top of the world from the early 90s to about the mid 90s. After Pac and Biggie died, it kind of switched up a little bit, but it was like everybody wanted to be a gangster. You know what I mean? Everybody wanted to be hard. Everybody wanted to be edgy and shit. So that's what I remember about the 90s. There's a lot of crazy things that were happening around that time. And it's just like, I think it was crazy because, like I said, things were getting edgier and edgier. And I think that stopped once you had the 9/11 attacks. I could be wrong because I got busted in 99. So I missed kind of the beginnings of 2000s and all that to see how that would have changed. But I would imagine things probably changed and took a more serious tone when 9/11 happened. That's what I would estimate. And just by looking back, that's what I kind of see. So, but yeah, that was the 90s. It was definitely a different time. And what's crazy about the 90s is it's about the same amount of time now. Like, from now to the 90s was what, about 30 years, right? It's 20 to 30 years. From the 90s to the 60s, it was that same time frame. So it's a trip, man. Oh yeah, clothes. Go back to clothes. I did want to bring up this. One thing that people try to sport, and that I even tried a few times, were solos. Solo pants were like straight leg pants. but sometimes they look like bell bottoms. So I'd be like, I don't know, man. But solo shorts were the shit. So I used to wear the solo shorts with the baby cuff, bam, high socks. Like, it was a trip, man. The 90s were a trip. But yeah, thank you guys for chilling with me, taking that stroll through memory lane. Catch you guys again, and with that, we out. Peace.